I died once on a frozen road, and the last person I saw before everything went dark was my own sister standing there, watching. But the real question is, why didn't she try to save me? My name is Violet. I'm 28 years old, and until that night, I believed I understood what family meant. I worked as a financial manager, handling high-value client portfolios and overseeing my parents' estate after they passed away. I was the responsible one, the stable one, the one who kept everything together. And Daphne, my older sister, was the opposite. But I never thought she would try to kill me. This is the story of the night everything fell apart, and the moment I realized that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. It was one of those nights where the world felt eerily quiet, as if something was holding its breath. Milwaukee was buried under heavy snow, the kind that muffles every sound and turns the city into a white, frozen maze. Streetlights flickered through the blizzard, casting long shadows across the empty road as I drove home in my silver sedan. I remember gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. The roads were slick, visibility was poor, and the wind kept pushing the car sideways in sudden, unpredictable gusts. But I wasn't scared. I'd driven through worse. At least, that's what I thought. A pair of blinding headlights suddenly appeared in my rearview mirror, too bright, too close. I frowned and adjusted the mirror, trying to make sense of the vehicle behind me. It was a black SUV, tailing me at a distance that felt intentional. I told myself I was overthinking it. I turned my focus back to the road just as I approached a sharp curve, a stretch I had driven 100 times before. My foot instinctively pressed down on the brake pedal, and that's when everything went wrong. Instead of slowing down, the car accelerated. For a split second, my brain refused to process what was happening. I pressed the brake again, harder this time, panic rising in my chest like a wave crashing against my ribs. Nothing. The car surged forward, tires skidding violently on the icy road. My hands tightened around the wheel as I tried to regain control, but it felt like the car had a will of its own, like something had snapped, something I couldn't fix. No, 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 no. The curve came too fast. The guardrail rushed toward me, and in that instant, time stretched into something unbearable. I remember the sound, the metal screeching, the glass shattering, the sickening weightlessness as the car broke through the barrier and plunged into the darkness below. And then, impact. The force slammed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. The airbag exploded in front of my face, the pressure snapping my head back as everything around me spun out of control. Pain shot through my body, sharp and disorienting, before fading into something distant, something numb. I don't know how long I was conscious after that. Seconds, maybe. Long enough to realize I was trapped, long enough to feel the cold seeping in, and long enough to see her. Through the cracked windshield, my vision blurred and fading. I saw headlights above, still, unmoving. The black SUV had stopped at the edge of the road. A door opened. A figure stepped out. Even through the haze of blood and snow, I recognized her immediately. Daphne, my sister. Relief hit me first, raw and overwhelming. She had followed me. She was here. She was going to help me. I tried to move, tried to call out, but my body wouldn't respond. My voice was swallowed by the freezing air, barely more than a whisper. Daphne. She stood at the edge of the ravine, looking down at me. Not running, not shouting for help, just watching. At first, I thought she was in shock, that she didn't understand what had happened yet. But then seconds passed, and then more. She didn't move, didn't call anyone, didn't even try to climb down. She just stood there, her silhouette framed by the falling snow, as if she was waiting for something, or maybe making sure of something. A strange, cold feeling spread through my chest, something deeper than fear, something I couldn't explain, not in that moment. Why wasn't she helping me? Why was she just standing there? My vision began to darken, the edges fading into black as the cold wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The last thing I remember was her turning away, walking back to her car, and disappearing. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, the world felt different. The first thing I noticed was the sound, a steady, rhythmic beeping that cut through the silence. My head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain, each pulse echoing behind my eyes. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, unresponsive. Hospital. That was my first thought. The sterile smell confirmed it. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights above me, squinting as everything slowly came into focus. The ceiling was unfamiliar. The room was too quiet. A doctor appeared beside me, his voice calm, almost reassuring, as he explained that I had been unconscious for nearly 24 hours. A mild concussion, multiple bruises, but no life-threatening injuries. "You're very lucky," he said. Lucky. I almost laughed. Because luck had nothing to do with what happened. As he spoke, my eyes drifted toward the doorway, expecting no, assuming that someone would be there. Daphne. She had been the last person I saw. She had to be the one who called for help, the one who brought me here. But the doorway was empty. Minutes passed. No one came. A nurse entered to check my IV, her expression polite but distant. I swallowed the dryness in my throat and asked the question that had been building inside me since I woke up. Was my sister here? She hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. "No," she said gently. "No one came with you." The words didn't make sense. I frowned, trying to sit up, ignoring the dizziness that immediately followed. "That's not possible," I insisted. "She was there. She saw the crash." The nurse exchanged a quick glance with the doctor before turning back to me. "The woman who brought you in dropped your purse at the front desk," she explained carefully. "She didn't stay, didn't leave a name, didn't fill out any paperwork." A strange silence filled the room. I felt it then, that same cold feeling from the night of the crash, creeping back into my chest. "She just left?" I whispered. The nurse nodded. "Yes." I stared at the ceiling, my mind struggling to catch up with what I was hearing. Daphne had found me. She had seen me bleeding, trapped, barely alive, and she walked away. No explanation. No concern. Nothing. And in that moment, lying in a hospital bed, with no one by my side, I realized something that terrified me more than the crash itself. Whatever happened on that road wasn't an accident. The moment that thought settled in my mind, this wasn't an accident. Something inside me changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a switch flipping in the dark. I lay there in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that night over and over again. The headlights, the brakes, the fall, and most of all, Daphne standing there, watching me like I was already gone. If she had just panicked and left, that would have been one thing. But she stayed. She waited. That was what I couldn't shake. The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled me back to the present. I turned my head slightly as the nurse adjusted my IV, her movements gentle but efficient. I studied her face, searching for something, anything that might confirm I was misunderstanding the situation. How long was I alone?" I asked quietly. She hesitated again, clearly choosing her words. "You were brought in late last night," she said. "We stabilized you immediately, but no one came after that. No calls, no visitors." No calls, no visitors. It felt surreal hearing those words out loud. Daphne and I might not have been perfect sisters, but we were all each other had left after our parents died. At least, that's what I had always believed. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Can I borrow something? A phone? Tablet? I need to contact my office." The nurse nodded and handed me a tablet after a moment. My fingers trembled slightly as I logged into my email, blaming it on the lingering effects of the concussion, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. It was fear. Not the kind that makes you scream. The kind that settles quietly in your chest and refuses to leave. My inbox loaded slowly, and when it finally appeared, my breath caught. Dozens of notifications. Not from friends, not from family, from the bank. All marked urgent. A cold knot twisted in my stomach as I opened the first one, then the second, then the third. Each message was a security alert regarding pending transactions. Large ones, very large ones. I quickly logged into the banking system, my pulse starting to pound in my ears. The screen loaded, and when the numbers appeared, I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 3 separate requests. all submitted within hours of my accident, all attempting to liquidate significant portions of the trust fund my parents had left behind. The trust fund that I controlled. My chest tightened as I stared at the timestamps. They didn't just overlap with the accident, they followed it. Almost immediately, as if someone had been waiting, my fingers hovered over the screen, cold and unsteady. There were only two people in the world who knew the details of that account. Me and Daphne. I leaned back against the pillow, my mind racing, trying desperately to find another explanation. A mistake, a coincidence, anything that didn't point to the conclusion forming in my head. But then, a memory surfaced. Sharp, clear, unavoidable. It was from just a week ago. We were in the kitchen, the soft hum of the heater filling the silence between us. Daphne had been leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that had made me uncomfortable at the time. "You should really get your car checked," she had said casually. "The brakes didn't sound right yesterday." I remember frowning, confused. "They're fine. I just had it serviced a few months ago." She shook her head, pushing off the counter and grabbing her coat. "Winter's different. Roads get worse. You don't want to risk it." There had been something in her tone, something almost insistent. "I know a place," she continued. "They're cheaper than your usual mechanic. I can take it in for you." At the time, I thought she was just being helpful. Now it felt like something else entirely. I could still see the way she held out her hand for my keys, the way she smiled when I gave them to her, the way she came back later that evening, casually tossing them onto the table. "All fixed," she had said. "You're good to go." A chill ran down my spine as the memory settled into place. I slowly closed my eyes, letting out a shaky breath. The brakes didn't fail. They were made to fail. And the timing of those transactions? That wasn't desperation. That was planning. Daphne hadn't just left me in that ravine. She had expected me not to come back. A wave of nausea hit me, and I pressed my hand against my stomach, trying to steady myself. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something darker, something colder. She hadn't acted in a moment of weakness. She had calculated every step, and I had never seen it coming. The nurse returned to check on me, her expression softening slightly when she noticed my pale face. "Are you okay?" she asked. I forced a small nod, quickly locking the tablet and handing it back. "I just need some rest," I said. But that wasn't true. Rest was the last thing I needed. Because now that I understood what had happened, everything had changed. I couldn't stay here. If Daphne believed I was still unconscious, or weak, or unaware, then I had an advantage. But the moment she realized I knew the truth, that advantage would disappear. And I didn't know how far she was willing to go to protect herself. I glanced toward the door again, half expecting her to walk in at any moment with that same calm expression she had worn at the edge of the ravine. Watching. Waiting. No, I couldn't let that happen. I needed help. There was only one person I could trust in a situation like this. My lawyer. Mr. Finch. My hands steadied slightly as I reached for the tablet again, asking the nurse for just a few more minutes. She hesitated but handed it back. I quickly searched for his private number and pressed call, my heart pounding as the line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, "Violet?" His voice was rough, surprised. Relief flooded through me so suddenly it almost hurt. "Mr. Finch," I said quickly, keeping my voice low. "I need you to listen carefully. I don't have much time." There was a pause on the other end. Then his tone shifted instantly, sharp and focused. "Go ahead." "My brakes didn't fail," I said, each word deliberate. "They were tampered with, and there are unauthorized attempts to access the trust fund. I hesitated, the word catching in my throat. "I think Daphne is involved." Silence. Heavy. Serious. "I understand," he said finally. "Are you safe?" I glanced around the room, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. "For now," I replied. "But I can't stay here. If she finds out I'm awake." "I'm on my way," he cut in. "Don't speak to anyone. Don't sign anything. I'll handle the discharge." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Please hurry." The call ended, and I slowly lowered the tablet, my reflection faintly visible on the dark screen. For a long moment, I just stared at it. At the person looking back at me. Something in my eyes had changed. The fear was still there. But it wasn't the only thing anymore. There was something else. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. Daphne thought she had removed the only obstacle, standing between her and everything she wanted. She thought I was broken. Helpless. Out of the way. But she was wrong. Very wrong. Because the version of me she tried to leave behind in that frozen ditch didn't exist anymore. And the woman who survived? She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to forgive. She was going to make sure the truth came out. No matter what it cost. I didn't call the police. That was the first decision that truly marked the difference between who I used to be and who I was becoming. Because the old me, the version of Violet who still believed in fairness, in quick justice, in doing the right thing, would have reported everything immediately. I would have trusted the system to protect me. But the woman lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling after realizing her own sister had tried to kill her? She understood something far more dangerous. Truth alone isn't enough. You need proof. And I didn't just want Daphne questioned. I wanted her cornered, with no way out. Mr. Finch arrived faster than I expected. Within 20 minutes, he was standing at the foot of my hospital bed, his usually composed face drawn tight with concern. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't waste time. One look at me, and he knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. "This is serious," he said quietly, pulling the curtain around us for privacy. "If what you're saying is true, we need to move carefully." "I know," I replied. My voice was steady, even though my body still ached from the crash. "That's why I didn't call anyone else." He studied me for a moment, as if trying to measure how much I had changed in just a few hours. "Good," he said finally. "Then we do this properly." The discharge process was handled quickly and quietly. No announcements, no paperwork that would draw attention. Mr. Finch arranged everything under the pretense of a private transfer for recovery. By the time anyone thought to check on me, I was gone. The cold air hit my face the moment we stepped outside the hospital, sharp and real, grounding me in a way the sterile room never could. I pulled my coat tighter around me, ignoring the dull ache in my ribs as we walked toward his car. "Where will you go?" he asked as he opened the door. "Somewhere she won't look first," I said. And that place was Stella's apartment. Stella had been my best friend for over a decade. She knew me better than anyone else, maybe even better than Daphne ever had. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, pale, bruised, and wrapped in bandages, her expression shifted from confusion to shock in seconds. "Violet," she whispered. "I need your help," I said simply. That was all it took. She didn't ask questions right away. She didn't hesitate. She stepped aside and let me in, closing the door behind me as if sealing me off from the world outside. The warmth of her apartment wrapped around me instantly, a stark contrast to the cold, calculated reality I had just left behind. The scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air, mixed with old books and something faintly floral. It felt safe, but I knew better than to trust that feeling completely. Not anymore. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence. 3 days of pretending I didn't exist. And during those 3 days, I watched. Mr. Finch helped me secure access to the security system in my family home. Cameras I had installed months ago for safety, something Daphne had once laughed about, were now the very tools that would expose her. I sat on Stella's couch, a blanket draped over my shoulders, eyes fixed on the tablet screen as the live feed streamed in high definition. At first, nothing happened. The house remained still, empty, quiet, until the front door burst open. The sound alone made my heart skip. Daphne stepped inside. But this wasn't the version of her I was used to. Gone was the polished, composed woman who always carried herself with effortless confidence. In her place was someone frantic, disheveled, breathing heavily as she slammed the door behind her and leaned against it like she was barely holding herself together. I leaned forward slightly, my fingers tightening around the edge of the tablet. She looked terrified. Not sad, not worried, terrified. And that told me everything I needed to know. Whatever she had heard at the hospital, it had shaken her. Good. She pushed herself off the door and moved quickly through the hallway, her heels echoing sharply against the floor as she headed straight for the home office. No hesitation, no distraction, just purpose. I followed her every movement through the camera feed as she entered the room and rushed toward the wall safe. Her hands trembled as she punched in the code, her movements jerky, impatient. For a brief moment, I held my breath. Then, a red light flashed. Denied. Again. Denied. Her frustration exploded instantly. What? She snapped, hitting the keypad harder, as if force alone would make it work. But it didn't, because she didn't know what I had done. The night before the trip, the night before everything changed, I had reset the code. I didn't even know why I did it at the time. Just a feeling. A quiet instinct I couldn't explain. Now, it might have saved everything. Daphne let out a sharp, angry sound and kicked the safe door, the impact echoing through the room. She ran a hand through her hair, pacing back and forth like a trapped animal before pulling out her phone. I leaned closer, barely breathing as the audio feed picked up her voice. Pick up! Pick up! She muttered under her breath. Then the call connected. Her tone changed instantly. Give me 2 more days, she said, her voice tight, strained. She's not dead yet. But I'll find a way to get her signature. The words hit me like ice water. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't think. She's not dead yet. Not if. Not maybe. Not even a hint of concern. Just confirmation. She had expected me to die. And worse, she had promised someone else that I would. I felt something inside my chest twist sharply, a pain far deeper than anything the crash had caused. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about intent, about choice, about a line she had crossed without hesitation. I pressed the record button with shaking fingers, making sure every second of that conversation was saved, backed up, untouchable. This was evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. Daphne continued pacing, her voice rising as the person on the other end clearly pushed back. I said I'll handle it, she snapped. Just don't do anything stupid until I call you again. The call ended abruptly. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, before grabbing a porcelain vase from the desk and throwing it against the wall. It shattered instantly, pieces scattering across the floor. I didn't flinch. I just watched. Because, for the first time, I wasn't the one breaking. Stella sat down beside me quietly, placing a cup of tea on the table without taking her eyes off the screen. She had heard everything. We both had. How long are you going to let this go on? She asked softly after a moment. You have enough to call the police right now. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I watched Daphne one last time as she stood in the middle of the destroyed office, surrounded by the mess she had created. Then I turned the screen off. The room fell silent. I looked at Stella, meeting her gaze with a calmness I didn't recognize in myself. Not yet, I said. She frowned slightly. Violet, if I go to the police now, she'll get arrested for fraud. Maybe conspiracy, I continued, my voice steady. But she'll find a way out. She always does. I leaned back slowly, ignoring the dull ache in my body. I don't want her to just get caught, I added quietly. I want her to lose everything. Stella didn't speak, but I could see the shift in her expression. She understood. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge in the way people usually think. This was about control. About making sure Daphne could never hurt me or anyone else again. She tried to kill me, I said finally, the words landing heavier now that they were spoken out loud. I'm not going to let her walk away from that. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was final. Because in that moment, the last piece of who I used to be fell away completely. Daphne thought she was the one in control. She thought she was the one pulling the strings. But she didn't realize something crucial. The moment she failed to finish what she started, the moment I survived, the roles changed. And now, I wasn't the one being hunted anymore. I was the one setting the trap. I thought the worst part was over. I thought once I had proof, real proof, everything would start to fall into place. I was wrong. Because Daphne didn't panic. She adapted. And when she realized she couldn't control me directly anymore, she chose a different battlefield. Public opinion. It started quietly. A few missed calls, a couple of unread messages, then more. My phone, which had been silent for days while I stayed hidden at Stella's apartment, suddenly came alive with notifications, emails, texts, missed calls stacking on top of each other like something was building beneath the surface. At first, I ignored them. I told myself I needed to stay focused, to keep my attention on the plan we were building with Mr. Finch. But something in my chest tightened with every vibration of the phone, a quiet instinct telling me this wasn't random. This was deliberate. And then, it happened. A notification popped up that made my stomach drop. Daphne Lee is live now. My fingers hovered over the screen for just a second before I tapped it. The video loaded instantly. And there she was. Sitting in the center of our living room, dressed in soft, neutral tones, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup carefully done to look just messy enough, just emotional enough to appear real. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched a tissue in her hand. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her. I don't know what to do anymore, she sobbed, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile, not unstable. My sister, she's not herself after the accident. My chest tightened. Every word was calculated, careful, designed. She's been acting paranoid, accusing me of things that don't make any sense, Daphne continued, lowering her voice as if sharing something deeply personal. I'm really worried about her mental health. The comment section exploded. Messages flooded the screen faster than I could read them. Stay strong. You're such a good sister. That sounds like trauma. She needs help. I felt my fingers curl slowly around the edge of the phone. This wasn't just manipulation. This was strategy. She wasn't trying to defend herself. She was rewriting the narrative. Daphne dabbed her eyes gently, her expression shifting into something softer, almost self-sacrificing. I've been trying to take care of everything while she recovers, she said. The business, the finances, everything our parents left behind. There it was. The real target. She glanced down briefly, as if gathering herself, then looked back into the camera with just the right amount of vulnerability. But I can't do it alone, she whispered. And I'm scared she's going to make decisions that could hurt herself. Or others. The implication hung in the air. Not direct, but powerful, unstable, unreliable, dangerous. She was planting the idea in people's minds before I even had a chance to defend myself. And it was working. I watched in silence as the viewers increased, the sympathy grew, and her performance reached its peak. By the time the live stream ended, she had turned herself into the concerned, responsible sister, and me into the problem, the villain. I lowered the phone slowly, my heart beating in a slow, heavy rhythm. For a moment, neither Stella nor I spoke. Then her voice cut through the silence, sharp with anger. This is insane, she said, pacing across the room. She's lying to thousands of people like it's nothing. I didn't answer, because I was still thinking, still processing, still calculating. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. A business contact. One of our long-term partners. I answered. Violet, he said, his tone hesitant. I just saw something online. Of course he did. I wanted to check in, he continued carefully. There's been some concern raised about your condition. I closed my eyes briefly. Here it comes. I'm fine, I said calmly. This is a personal matter. It's being handled. There was a pause. I understand, he replied, but his voice carried something else, no doubt. But from a business perspective, we have to be cautious. The board is uncomfortable moving forward with the upcoming contract until things are clarified. Clarified. Suck a neutral word. Such a damaging one. You're pausing the deal? I asked. We're postponing, he corrected gently. Just until we have official confirmation that everything is stable. Stable. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Daphne knew exactly where to hit me. Not physically. Not anymore. But here, my reputation, my credibility, everything I had spent years building. She was dismantling it piece by piece, in front of everyone. The call ended, and I lowered the phone, staring at the blank screen. She's not just going after the money, Stella said quietly. She's going after your life. I nodded slowly. I know. And that was when I understood something important. Fighting her on social media would be a mistake. Because that was her stage. Her rules. Her audience. If I reacted emotionally, if I tried to defend myself publicly, it would only make me look exactly how she had described me. Unstable. Desperate. Out of control. No. I couldn't fight her there. I had to take this somewhere she couldn't manipulate. Somewhere, facts mattered more than performance. I stood up slowly, ignoring the dull ache that still lingered in my body. We don't respond, I said. Stella turned to me, surprised. What? We let her talk, I continued, my voice calm. We let her dig herself deeper. She stared at me for a moment, searching my face. And, in the meantime, I met her gaze. We get the proof that ends everything. Because what I had so far wasn't enough. It was strong. But it wasn't undeniable. Not yet. And then it hit me. Not as a thought. As a realization. Sudden. Sharp. The car. Everything started with the car. The brake failure. The crash. If I could prove the brakes were tampered with, then everything else would collapse. The lies. The narrative. Her entire story. Because no amount of acting could cover up attempted murder. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mr. Finch immediately. He picked up on the second ring. I need you to find the car, I said without preamble. There was a pause. I assumed insurance would have... No. I cut in. Daphne wouldn't leave something like that to chance. She would have gotten rid of it. Silence. Then, I'll check, he said. The next few hours felt like an eternity. Every minute stretched longer than the last as I sat there, waiting, watching the world slowly shift under the weight of Daphne's lies. More messages came in. More silence from people I thought I could trust. More distance. And through it all, I stayed still. Because moving too early meant losing. Finally, my phone rang. Mr. Finch, I answered immediately. I found it, he said. My heart stopped. She paid a private hauler in cash, he continued. Had the car taken to an unlicensed scrapyard. They're scheduled to crush it tonight. Tonight. Of course. She was cleaning up, erasing the last piece of evidence that could expose her. We don't have much time, he added. I was already grabbing my coat. Send me the location. Stella was at the door before I even finished speaking. We didn't say much on the drive. We didn't need to. The city blurred past us in streaks of light and shadow as we followed the coordinates into the industrial outskirts of Milwaukee. The scrapyard came into view like something out of a nightmare. Dark. Cold. Endless rows of twisted metal under the pale glow of overhead lights. We parked a distance away and met Mr. Finch near a break in the fence. No security at this hour, he said quietly. But we don't have long. We slipped inside. The air was bitter, biting through my coat as we moved between piles of crushed vehicles, searching. Every second felt louder. Closer. Like time itself was running out. And then, I saw it. My car, or what was left of it, sitting near the conveyor. Waiting. I didn't think. I ran. Dropped to my knees beside it, my hands shaking as I pulled out the flashlight and aimed it under the frame. Please, please let it be there. The beam cut through the darkness. And then, I saw it. Clean. Precise. Undeniable. The brake line. Cut. Not worn. Not broken. Cut. My breath caught in my throat as the truth finally, fully settled in. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't theory. This was proof. Real. Physical. Irrefutable. Mr. Finch, I whispered. He was already beside me, documenting everything, carefully removing the damaged section as evidence. Behind us, the machinery roared to life. The crusher. We had seconds. But it didn't matter anymore. Because Daphne thought she had erased her tracks. She thought she had rewritten the story. But she made one mistake. She underestimated me. And now? I finally had what I needed to destroy her. I could have ended it right there. With the brake line in my hands, with the recording of her voice, with everything we had gathered, I could have gone straight to the police and watched it all collapse in a matter of days. But that wouldn't have been enough. Because Daphne didn't just try to take my life. She tried to take my identity, my reputation, everything I had built. And if I was going to end this, I needed to make sure she had nowhere left to stand. So I waited. Not passively, not blindly. Every move from that point forward was calculated, deliberate, controlled. Mr. Finch handled the legal groundwork quietly, ensuring the evidence we had would hold up in court. Stella stayed by my side, watching, listening, helping me keep track of every shift in Daphne's behavior. And Daphne. She kept playing her role, desperately. Her public image didn't just survive, it grew. Sympathy poured in from people who only saw the version of her she wanted them to see. Donations, support, invitations. She used everything. She turned herself into a victim, a caretaker, a martyr, and behind that carefully crafted image, she was running out of time. The debts she owed were catching up to her. The pressure was building. I could see it in the way she moved on the security feeds, in the late-night phone calls, in the small cracks beginning to form in her composure. She was getting reckless. And that was exactly what I needed. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. An annual fundraising gala for the Milwaukee Business Association, one of the most high-profile events in the city. Investors, executives, influential figures, all gathered in one place. Daphne was going to be there. Of course she was. She needed money, and she needed credibility. That event would give her both if no one stopped her. She's going to use this, Stella said as we watched her latest livestream announcement. This is her chance to secure everything she needs. I know, I replied quietly. And you're going to let her? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The bruises had faded slightly, but the bandage around my head was still visible. The physical wounds were healing, but something deeper had already changed. No, I said finally. I'm going to end it there. The night of the gala arrived, wrapped in gold and silence. The Grand Hotel shimmered under the glow of chandeliers, the air filled with soft music and polite conversation. Men in tailored suits, women in elegant gowns, everyone playing their part in a world built on appearances. And Daphne, she fit in perfectly. From where I stood, hidden just beyond the velvet curtains near the entrance, I could see her moving through the crowd like she belonged there. Her crimson gown caught the light with every step, her smile effortless, her posture confident. If I didn't know her, I might have believed her too. She laughed at the right moments, touched people's arms just long enough to build connection, leaned in just enough to make her words feel personal. And then, she found her target, Mr. Henderson, a retired banker who had once managed our family accounts. I watched as she approached him, her expression softening instantly into something vulnerable. I didn't expect to see you here, she said, her voice warm, almost fragile. He smiled politely, unaware. I've been dealing with a lot, she continued, lowering her gaze. My sister's condition, it's worse than we thought. There it was again. The same lie. Repackaged. Refined. Effective. She's not capable of managing things right now, Daphne added gently. I've been trying to hold everything together, but... She hesitated. Perfect timing. I might need some help, just temporarily. I could almost see the calculation behind her eyes. She wasn't begging. She was positioning, framing her need as responsibility, as sacrifice, as love. And it was working. Mr. Henderson nodded slowly, concern flickering across his face. I see, he said. Well, perhaps we can discuss some options. That was it. That was the moment. If I waited any longer, she would win. I glanced at Mr. Finch, who stood beside me, his expression calm but firm. Ready? He asked. I nodded. And then, we stepped out. The shift was immediate. Conversations slowed. Eyes turned. A ripple of silence spread across the room like something unseen had entered the space. I could feel it. Every gaze, every whisper, every assumption breaking apart in real time. Because I wasn't supposed to be there. Not according to her story. Not according to the version of me she had created. Daphne turned. And, for the first time, since this began, she lost control. The glass in her hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor as her eyes locked onto mine. Shock. Pure. Unfiltered. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For a brief second, she looked exactly like she had on that night, at the edge of the ravine, caught between control and fear. But then, she recovered. Of course she did. She rushed toward me, her expression twisting into something urgent, almost panicked. "Violet," she started, reaching out. But it wasn't concern. It was damage control. "Security," she shouted suddenly, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room. "This woman shouldn't be here. She's not well." The words echoed. The lie, now spoken out loud, hung in the air like a challenge. Two security guards hesitated, glancing between us. I didn't move, didn't raise my voice, didn't react. Because I didn't need to. Before they could take a step, a voice filled the room. Deep. Authoritative. "Stop. Mister." Caldwell stepped forward from the stage, his presence alone enough to silence any remaining doubt. He was one of the most respected figures in the city, and more importantly, he knew the truth. His gaze locked onto Daphne, disappointment etched into every line of his face. "The only person acting here," he said calmly, "is you." A collective murmur spread through the crowd. Daphne froze. "She is fully competent," he continued, gesturing toward me, "and the sole legal authority over her family's estate." The shift was instant. The same people who had listened to her moments ago stepped back. Distance. Doubt. Judgment. Mr. Finch moved beside me, presenting the documents, the evidence, the confirmation of everything she had tried to hide. Daphne's world didn't collapse all at once. It unraveled, thread by thread. Her expression changed not into fear this time, but desperation. She looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone who would still believe her. No one stepped forward. Not Mr. Henderson. Not the investors. Not the people who had praised her just minutes earlier. She was alone. And for the first time, everyone could see it. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Because the truth didn't require performance. It didn't require tears. It didn't require manipulation. It just existed. Daphne looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with something darker now, hatred, sharp and unrestrained. But I didn't look away. I didn't soften. I didn't hesitate. Because whatever bond we once had was already gone. She turned abruptly and walked out, her heels striking the floor with uneven force, the sound echoing long after she disappeared. The room slowly came back to life. But nothing was the same. Because everyone had seen it. The mask, the lie, the truth. And as I stood there, surrounded by people who were only just beginning to understand what had really happened, I realized something important. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Because exposure was only the first step. What came next would be the fall. If the gala was the moment her mask cracked, what came after was the moment it shattered completely. Because humiliation doesn't destroy someone like Daphne. Desperation does. For 2 days after the gala, everything went quiet. Too quiet. No live streams. No dramatic posts. No carefully crafted messages to regain sympathy. It was as if she had disappeared completely, and somehow, that silence felt more dangerous than anything she had done before. People like Daphne don't stop. They adapt. They survive. And when they're cornered, they do something reckless. I knew it. I felt it in the way my phone stayed still, in the absence of noise where there should have been chaos. It wasn't over. It was just shifting. "She's going to do something," Stella said one evening, pacing slowly across the living room. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the security feed of my office building. I know. Because I had already thought 3 steps ahead. Daphne had lost her credibility. She had lost her access to the trust. The people she relied on had stepped back. The debts she owed were still there, waiting, pressing, tightening around her like a noose. That left her with only one option. Something illegal. Something immediate. Something desperate enough to buy her time. And there was only one thing left she could take. The company seal. With that single object, she could authorize transactions, forge documents, and access funds she no longer had permission to touch. She would come for it. It wasn't a guess. It was a certainty. So instead of stopping her, I made sure she could get in. Mr. Finch arranged for the silent alarm system to be temporarily disabled, just enough to make the building seem vulnerable. But every camera remained active, every angle covered, and most importantly, the police were already waiting, hidden, watching, prepared. I stood in the hallway outside my office that night, the lights dimmed, my breath slow and controlled, as I listened to the faint sounds echoing through the empty building. Footsteps. Soft at first. Then clearer. Closer. My heart didn't race the way I expected it to. It didn't feel like fear. It felt like inevitability. The frosted glass of my office door cast a blurred silhouette as Daphne moved inside, her shadow shifting rapidly as she began searching. Drawers opening. Papers scattering. The faint, frantic rhythm of someone running out of time. I stepped closer, just enough to see her clearly through the glass. She looked different. Not polished. Not composed. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her movements sharp and uneven, her breathing heavy as she tore through everything in front of her. This wasn't the woman who stood confidently at the gala. This was someone unraveling. Completely. I felt something stir in my chest. Not pity. Not anymore. Just distance. Because the person in that room was no longer my sister. She was the consequence of her own choices. Her hands moved quickly, pushing aside documents, knocking over framed photos without a second glance. One of them hit the floor near her feet, the photo of us as children, standing between our parents, smiling like nothing could ever break us. She didn't even notice. Her fingers finally closed around the object she had been searching for. The seal. She let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh, gripping it tightly, like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. And that was it. That was the moment. I gave a small nod. The lights snapped on instantly, flooding the room with harsh brightness. Daphne froze. The seal slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a hollow sound. And then, the doors opened. Officers moved in quickly, their presence filling the room before she had time to react. "Don't move!" The command echoed sharply against the walls. For a split second, she didn't understand what was happening. Her eyes darted wildly from one face to another, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Then she saw me, standing just beyond the line of officers. Calm. Still. Watching. The realization hit her all at once. Her expression twisted, shock collapsing into rage in a matter of seconds. "Violet!" she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she had just lost. "You set me up." The officers moved closer, restraining her arms as she struggled, her movements desperate, chaotic. "I'm your sister!" she screamed. "You can't do this to me!" For a moment, the words hung in the air. Sister. The word felt foreign now. Distant. Like it belonged to a different life. I stepped forward slowly, stopping just out of her reach. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "A sister," I said quietly, "wouldn't cut my brake lines and leave me to die." The room fell silent. Her body went still. Completely still. The fight drained out of her in an instant as the meaning of my words settled in. She knew. She knew that I knew. The lead detective stepped forward, his voice steady as he began listing the charges: burglary, fraud, attempted bodily harm, destruction of property. Each word landed heavier than the last. Daphne didn't resist anymore. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just stood there, empty, as if the weight of reality had finally crushed whatever was left of her. I watched as they led her away, her figure disappearing down the hallway that once felt like a place of security. And, just like that, it was over. Or, at least, the part of the story that belonged to her. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom filled with quiet whispers and watchful eyes. The trial had drawn attention more than I expected. People wanted to see how it would end. They wanted closure. So did I. Daphne sat at the defense table, a shadow of the person she used to be. The confidence, the elegance, the carefully constructed image, it was all gone. In its place was something smaller, fragile, real. For the first time, she looked like someone who understood what she had done. The judge's voice echoed through the room as the verdict was read. Guilty, on all counts. Attempted murder. Fraud. Burglary. The words settled over everything like a final, irreversible truth. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. No performance. No manipulation. No escape. As the officers moved to take her away, she looked back at me one last time. I expected anger, blame, something, but there was nothing. Just emptiness. And maybe, for a brief second, regret. I didn't react. I didn't move. Because whatever connection we once had already been severed long before that moment. After the trial, I made a decision. I sold the house. Every room, every hallway, every corner of that place held memories I no longer wanted to carry. Not just of what Daphne had done, but of who we used to be. I moved into a smaller apartment near Lake Michigan, where the light felt different, softer, cleaner. Like the past couldn't quite reach me there. I used the money from the trust not for myself, not entirely, but to create something new. A scholarship fund in my parents' name. Something that would outlast everything that had happened. Something that would mean something. Life didn't go back to normal. It became something else. Something quieter, stronger. One afternoon, months later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Plain, white, unremarkable. Except for one thing. Her handwriting. I stood there for a long time holding it, wondering, was it an apology? An excuse? Another attempt to reach me? For a moment, I considered opening it, just to know, just to hear what she had to say after everything. But then I realized something. I didn't need to. Whatever was inside that envelope couldn't change anything. Not the past. Not the truth. Not who I had become. I walked over to the fireplace, held the letter above the flame, and let it go. The paper curled slowly, turning black, then ash, until there was nothing left. And as I stood there, watching it disappear, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not pain, just peace. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about survival, about choosing yourself when everything else falls apart, about walking away, even when it hurts. And finally, about letting go. Sometimes, the most painful stories aren't about enemies, but about the people we once called family. What happened to me wasn't just a betrayal, it was a moment that forced me to see the truth I had avoided for years. That love without boundaries can become weakness. That trust, when given to the wrong person, can cost you everything. But more importantly, it taught me that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about reclaiming your voice, your dignity, and your future. This story isn't here just to shock you. It's here to remind you that you are allowed to walk away from what breaks you even if it shares your blood. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself. If this journey stayed with you, if even a small part of it made you reflect, feel, or question something in your own life, then this story has done its job. And there are many more stories like this waiting to be told. So don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Truth Vault, where every story isn't just told, it's felt.